Welcome to Get In. I'm Debbie Rosas, founder of Nia Technique, a body and life movement art. It's an experience, practice, and also a lifestyle that's rooted in the design and function of something that we all have, a body. Today's topic is, it's about something that I believe a lot of human beings struggle with: their body. The relationship they have with their body and the relationship they have with image, fat, food, and feeling safe and at home in one's skin. Isn't that what we all want? Today's podcast is an invitation to journey inward and ask yourself, what about me? Have I ever experienced something like this? It's about looking at body truth, not judging, but just listening and hearing people's truth about the complex and often unspoken human experiences that shape us around body, family, trauma, fat, food. Today's episode features Fritz Liedtke, and he's author of this amazing book. I laid in bed yesterday and read it for the second time. I cried for the second time. Was deeply touched. Skeleton in the Closet. What are we talking about when I talk about fat and food and family and trauma? We're talking about eating disordered lives. This powerful book blends personal storytelling, Gina, and other people's stories, with a stunning photographic journey of faces and bodies, capturing the raw and honest experiences of individuals living with anorexia and bulimia. Every story is a window into the courage that it takes to recognize and acknowledge a certain kind of truth, to be seen, to speak, and to want to heal. Reading Fritz's book reminded me of how vital it is to listen, not only to ourselves, but to our children, to our friends, to our family, and to see, to open our hearts to the vulnerable truths people carry. The journey, I call it a treacherous journey of growing up in a body. It can be scary. I believe that we humans, particularly as parents, I'm a parent, I can tell you, we have a lot of work to do. Fritz beautifully set the stage for me as a mother and as a human being to look, to listen, and to feel something, something that maybe you've wanted to turn away from and not look at. Other people's pain. When you can see it and you know there's something wrong, what do you do? Fritz points out that this is disease. It's not new. Now, this was news to me. In the 1935 second edition of the International Webster's Dictionary, anorexia, I love this definition, thank you, Fritz, is defined as wanting of appetite. So it made me wonder, what kind of appetite are we talking about here? What needs to be fed and nourished? Is it food or is it something deeper? Bulimia was described as a voracious, ox-like hunger. Today, anorexia is understood as the relentless pursuit of thinness. I think we all understand what that means from today's media. Certainly, I've understood that, been in the fitness industry for over 40 years. I've had many people come into class, and it was easy for me to recognize there's something here amiss. Even calling a doctor and saying, "Is it safe for this patient to come and exercise?" In pursuit of thinness, self inflicted starvation. I've seen it, I've experienced it in my family. Bulimia is a cycle of binging and purging. I've seen it in friends, often through vomiting and abusing laxatives. I've seen it. I've personally experienced it with friends. But the roots of this disease run far deeper. As with, I think, most disease, a deep emotional connection. Now, if you know anything about the work of Nia, everything is rooted in the body's way, the body's design and function. So we look at everything and we try to understand what, why, and how based on the body. Well, the only way we personalize something, we've got a mind, we've got the body, is through the emotions. The emotions, well, that's the coupling effect between mind and body that makes one's journey personal. It's Debbie's journey or Fritz's journey or Gina's journey. Maybe you know somebody like me, either through teaching or in your family, that has struggled with abuse, neglect, insecurity, self loathing, cruelty, thoughtless communication, all triggering deep emotional wounding. Or someone trying to fit into the unrealistic image of body perfection, the right size hips, the right height, the right size breasts, the right ears. People feeling maybe unworthy of love, of self love and parental love, any kind of love. Maybe you know, and maybe you yourself have in some way chased approval, success, wanting to control life, trying to silence the inner chaos in your mind and in your heart. Now, at the heart of these eating disorders, it's not just a battle with food, it's a deep war between fat and control, or image and control. And day after day, people that struggle with this disease, they wake up, gloves on, and they step into the ring of life, their life. And they fight day after day. They want to silence the relentless voice that says, fat's bad, fat is shameful, fat should be hidden, you can be thinner, there's something wrong with you. The consequences of this, and I'm going to call it, name it out right now as Fritz does, a mental disease, it's vast. From dehydration to malnutrition, muscle atrophy, inability to digest and eliminate food, and layers of subtle, moderate, and acute physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual pain, some visible, some not, but all lived. Each person's story in this book is unique, it's complex, and it has been shaped by their lived experience and the relationship they have with their body, fat and food, image, food. Now, food, it's supposed to nourish us. We need it. But sometimes when trauma begins, even a simple comment from a parent about weight or your success or your ability, your look, sometimes bullying or cultural judgment, emotional, mental, or sexual abuse, all of these things can trigger an imbalance, an unhealthy relationship with one's body and food, wanting to control something when the pain is so deep. I think it's our responsibilities, and certainly Fritz has taken on the responsibility as a writer through art, by the way, not just words, but imagery. It's beautiful. To educate today's culture, to educate adults, educators, and leaders. Why? To possibly help us look how can we protect, nurture, and guide our youth? Because here's the truth: a healthy person does not hurt their body. When we see a young person chasing an endorphin high by starving, cutting, isolating, it's not vanity, it's a cry for help. So, what do we do? Do we do nothing? Do we ignore it? This disease hurts the individual, families, communities. The pain of starving, binging, and purging is often compared to the deeper pain that someone's wanting to silence. They're even willing to die for it, all in pursuit of a promised land that's always a few pounds away. I'm 74, and I could tell you, I've looked in the mirror and said, God, you look fat today. Just the other day, I went to have my yearly checkup, and I said, I just hate this extra 10 pounds that I have. Now, I know I teach this stuff. I know my body hears that and goes, really? You hate me? I'm working so hard for you 24/7. I'm your best friend. I'm your partner. I look out for you even when you're sleeping. I manage homeostasis. And even when you eat a little too much or have a little too much to drink, I take care of it. My job is to work with you. But I still will think a negative thought. Let us remember that we are caretakers of our body and our children. And let us remember the journey of getting into our body and living in a body through life has peaks, it has valleys, it has plateaus. It's a hormonal, biological experience with tremendous emotional upheaval. Few of us were taught or given tools how to have a loving relationship with our body as we grow up and as we age. Yet, our body, I say, is the most important relationship we'll ever have. It's the most precious thing we own. And healing is a daily process. Loving is a daily process. Being in relationship in a loving and respectful way with our body that honors its journey. It takes education, a lot of education. Now, make no mistake that eating disorders are first and foremost, as I said, mental disorders. The work lies in understanding what is driving one to starve themselves, to binge. Why do they start? What's the trigger? And then realizing that the disease, it's not your fault. I love how Fritz reminds us that recovery is about rewriting your story and also about rewiring your brain from unhealthy survival strategies to healthy, life affirming behaviors. Now, if there's one thing that I know for sure, it's that human beings, especially children and teens, they are deeply sensitive, emotional, and receptive. They take everything in. Even in good, healthy homes, trauma can leave lasting scars. I remember somebody telling me that I had a bump on my nose. And for months, I sat in school like this. One comment. When left unacknowledged, these simple wounds or scars, they can fester. They can create unhealthy behavior and manifest in very harmful ways, derailing one's body and life. So, today, this episode, I invite you to listen with compassion and curiosity. And with Fritz and I, get into the truth of what does it mean to be human and heal and help each other. Let's begin. Welcome, Fritz. I am so excited to get into this conversation.
I'm excited too. Thanks for having me so much, Debbie. I'm honored.
Beautiful. I loved how your book took me back. It took me back to thinking about myself, my youth, my experience, remembering students and friends who have struggled. And what did I do or what did I not do? I loved the words you share. I can always be thinner. I think for a lot of people, that carrot, that promised land of thinness is so good. Thinness is what we should aspire to. I think it's still out there in our world today. I know it's etched in my mind. And even with all my tools in education, I don't think there's anybody that doesn't struggle with the issue of weight today. I'd love for you to begin by telling everybody your story.
My story in this sphere begins in high school. I was a quiet, intelligent learner. I loved school. I loved doing well. I loved succeeding. And I was also very active. I played a lot of sports, especially soccer. And so, kind of my story related to eating disorders starts in my senior year of high school when I developed asthma and had to drop out of sports. And so probably wasn't in the best shape at the time, but I started to notice my senior year of high school that as I'd eat lunch and go to class after lunch that I was tired. So for a class or two period after lunch, I just couldn't think very well. I couldn't do as well as I wanted to. So I thought, well, maybe if I eat less lunch, I can do better in my classes. So I started eating half my lunch, and that's really kind of what triggered it. So for me, it was this desire to succeed, to control my ability to concentrate and succeed and do well that got that pattern started for me. And that continued on that year of high school through the summer and into my first year of college. So I went to college. I was pretty thin. I was lonely. I was depressed. And one day I was in the nurse's office at school and had a cold and was asking for some help. And I remember sitting there on that stool and I finally just blurted out, I said, I need help. I feel really depressed and I don't know what to do. So we talked for a minute. And she immediately called up the counseling center there at the school and sent me straight down to talk with the director there. We had a really good conversation. And so he just set me up with one of their counselors and we met once a week for the rest of the school year. So over the course of that school year, we kind of unraveled all these things that I think we all unravel when you're going in that transition from adolescence to adulthood, right? We're
Yeah.
leaving home, taking all these new responsibilities, trying to figure out who we are, where we've come from, what we're going to be. So it's really helpful for me to talk through all these things. And in the course of that conversation, discover that I was anorexic. And that was not something I'd ever thought about. Certainly never thought about as a possibility for me. I just assumed that was like for pretty girls that wanted to be thin and control how they looked, right? So recognizing that, getting that help really helped turn the corner for me in returning to health. Thankfully for me, it only was probably about a year and a half. Whereas for many, many, many people, it's a lifetime thing or something that they get past, but then they're kind of constantly maintaining their healthy thought processes. So that's where the story started for me. And then I came to this project years later as an artist. I was between projects and needed to find something else to do next to chew on. And this idea of my own eating disorders kept coming back to mind. So I wrote up a proposal of what I wanted to do just to clarify my own thoughts. And then that proposal sat on my desk for a year because I could not figure out how to find people with eating disorders to talk to and photograph. Even though I had a residency at the time at a school, the teacher said, "Yeah, I could point out 5 kids right now in this classroom that have an eating disorder, but I can't tell you who they are,"
Right.
which is totally appropriate. So that sat on my desk until about a year later. I was working on another kind of just a. It was in the middle of winter in Oregon, which is dark and cold and wet. It's a really hard time for me to do anything creative. So I thought I'm just going to lean into this dark, cold, wet thing and see if there's anybody that wants to photograph out in the rain. So I put up this post on Craigslist, and I got people that responded. We photographed together out in the rain, and I thought to myself later, I thought if people are willing to respond to a kind of dumb project like that, what if I put this? What if I put this idea online of talking about eating disorders? So I put up a little post, and lo and behold, I'm out of the woodwork. Two, three, four people would contact me, and so we'd schedule time. We'd get together at coffee shops. We'd sit down and talk, and I would just sit there and I would ask them good questions, and then I would listen and I'd take some notes. And I was blown away by the depth of what people were willing to share with me as a stranger, just
Yeah.
because I was willing to listen. That was really eye opening for me. Yeah, I felt like almost like a confessor or a priest in that sense.
Well, my husband is a photographer as well. And I always say to him, watching the silence in his body behind the lens
Hmm.
is such a visceral, whole physical, whole energy body, no interference, stillness, listening to what's right in front of you with no distraction. And it's visceral. I can sense this this almost seamless continuity with the space around him and what he has in his hands and the image in front of him. I said, "That's oneness." If you ever wanted to see the sensation of oneness, watch a photographer when they have an image in front that they want to capture, right?
It's true. I
And
often catch myself. I catch myself sometimes focused like that so much so that when I have to go to talk to somebody, I have to breathe for a moment because I've been holding my breath,
exactly.
focusing. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, totally. Because 'cause you've got your life force energy is so integrated to that one thing, it's like you're holding this beautiful gift, which you are, the image of life, a person, whatever it may be. Um, I love, there are 2 things that you brought up that I think are important. One, the ability to sense how much nourishment we need so we can sustain a certain quality of wakeness in our body. I'm exactly the same way. It doesn't take much food for me to automatically go, I want to take a nap. I feel like the lion. And so I never ate breakfast because if I ate breakfast, I'd fall asleep in the first hour of school. And it's been years of learning how to manage my food intake and my life force energy. So I get how less is more. But there's that moment of less is more, and this I think is where you say it's a mental health issue. When the mental health says, "Well, if I feel this good without that, what happens if I take less?" When did that shift happen for you? Because you were originally, it was like, wow, I feel better eating less. This is great. But where did it go over the edge?
first year of college as a freshman, where I lost a lot of weight, and yeah, I think the depression really was that symptom of it as well.
Okay.
And so all those things came together, being in a new place, being on my own, not feeling well physically or mentally, that all really kind of triggered asking for help.
So the beauty of your little spirit saying, I need help, right? Some of us can. express that. Some of us can recognize it, acknowledge we need help. Others can't express it. And what I love is how you took this vision and made it possible for people who could not say, I need help. But through the avenue of artistry, you opened up the lens of possibility for them to come and share their story. You became that listener, right? Whether it
Yes.
be, a psychiatrist or, a social worker, whatever it is, you became that listener. And I do believe, my husband always says, nothing happens without a conversation. And that the conversation is one of the most important elements to building relationship healing, beginning the process. Um, what was the first conversation when you were in listening and you said to yourself, I've got something here? Was that Gina?
Gina is a friend of mine. We actually went to college together. In fact, we knew each other. Our stories actually kind of overlapped because we were in school at the same school together at the same time. So my story and hers, even though we didn't know this about each other for probably 15, 20 years, until I was working on this project. So no, Gina wasn't the first person I interviewed for this. In fact, she came later as I already created the photographs. A lot of the photographs we started talking about possibly collaborating together and having her write an essay for this book because she's a fantastic writer, and we'd collaborated before on one other project. So yeah, the first person I remember working with, a couple of ladies. In fact, I think it's the first one in this book, Sarah, where she talks about. In fact, can I read this? It's very
Yeah,
brief, but
please
I'll just
do.
read
I
her
love it
story.
when
Yeah,
authors read from their work.
yeah. This is the first photograph in the book, and it's a picture of Sarah, her torso, and she's got some ballerina shoes hung around her neck. She says this: "I remember when it started. I was 12. We were camping, and my dad told me I was starting to look a little fat, and that no one loved fat people. I felt so bad about what he said to me. I looked at myself and thought, maybe I am a little fat. So I started skipping meals and dancing until I couldn't anymore. I thought that if I was skinny, he would love me more." I think that last line is really key. I mean, there are a lot of reasons that people have eating disorders, but for many, it's just the desire to be loved or, to be seen and known for who we are. And I think that's really uh, key, well highlighted by her little story. Then,
I that really struck me too in the book. And I can remember my dad, very loving man, jokingly make comments about my sister and I when we started to develop breasts, and feeling like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. I should hide myself, right? And so it goes back to the parental thing or the friend thing. Words are so powerful. We have to really become so conscious of how delicate the mind of a child is and youth is, and
it's
how important it is to protect that,
Mhm.
to protect it, to nurture it, to not criticize it, right? But to see it as beautiful and whole and self reflection now, boy, when I look back on things that I may have said or done or gestures or even a facial expression to a
Yeah.
child, right?
Yeah. My daughter's 12 right now, so I think about this stuff a lot, and it's a little terrifying sometimes. I mean, you can't as a parent be perfect. You're gonna say something wrong, and I just think there has to be a lot of you have to over you just have to be a lot of has to be a lot of grace there. You have to understand that there's a lot of love as well.
In today's world, where PTSD is such a real thing, I jokingly say, I think everybody's has PTSD nowadays. They turn on the news and they get triggered. The
Yeah.
trauma level, the stress level is so high. And, with eating disorders linked to restricting food, even cutting, self-harm as a coping strategy to deal with the chaos in the world. Um, I love how you tell the story, and I think was it Gina who was running? Who was
Yes.
it? Yeah, Gina was running away to manage the chaos, to avoid family stress, so she didn't have to hear about the money or the emotional intensity. Um, Tell us a little bit more about Gina and her story.
Such a wonderful essay that she writes. Yeah, she talks about, I was just rereading it this morning. I was struck by a little story she tells about kind of how it started for her. Um, she was watching this program with her brother one night, late night on TV, in the one of the four channels he got back then. It was about this. It was about this man who was very overweight and who just wanted to die. And the program was about, this guy just wants to die. And so he thought, well, I'm so out of shape. I'm just going to go run until I collapse and die. So he went out running and ran until he couldn't run anymore, and he didn't die. And he was so disappointed that he put his shoes on the next day and did the same thing, and he still didn't die. So in 2 weeks later, now he's in better shape and he's feeling better and was losing weight. And so Gina kind of got inspired by that story of this guy running. So she and decided to do the same thing, both as a way to kind of run from the trouble at home, but also to try to lose weight. So I thought that was pretty interesting story. How kids pick up on the funniest little things and how it can change the trajectory of their lives for a period of time.
This Gina's story reflects what happens when trauma is internalized. It's not expressed. Like you were so lucky that you said, I need help, right?
Yeah,
And the whether it's external, abuse or internal, there's that moment I think for a lot of people where they feel like my body has betrayed me. Now, you talk about in the story, and I believe it was Gina. And I don't know if I'm getting this accurate or not, but that moment of wanting to die and the act became the reason to keep living. And I just found that as a through line. And, that pain can make us feel alive. Pain, the way I talk about pain and pleasure in the body, um, pain wakes us up. It brings us right here, right now, 100% presence to what's
yes,
going on. You can't be anywhere else, right? Just
right.
right here. And it's almost as though with an eating disorder, I'm seeing somebody, I want to know that I'm alive. It feels so painful. I want to die. I want to know that I still exist. It's kind of an um, odd medicine, I guess I would say.
Kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? Yes.
Very, very much. Yeah.
I'll respond with this little story from Olivia too. It's brief, but she talks about this. She says, I watched this show about bulimia and I thought it was cool. So I tried it, and there was this rush, this high without using drugs. It felt good not to get caught doing something that you know is wrong. Then one day I got caught by my grandma, and I felt so ashamed to be caught, especially by her, especially since she'd gone through this with one of her teenage daughters. It's so hard to get caught by someone who loves you so much, but not be able to tell them why.
Did you ever hear find out her why? Was it really that all she wanted to do is just kind of be dangerous?
I don't recall in that story. She was young. She was an adolescent when I spoke with her at the time, and I don't think I got that deep into her story.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. It's the pain as relief thing is so interesting because the brain's reward circuitry creates this biochemical feedback loop that reinforces the cycle of harm. And it's like one gets caught up in that loop, and then that's almost where I'd say it's almost like a maze, and repeating the behavior happens over and over again, and that behavior, in a sense, feels better than the pain that started the behavior.
Yeah. It becomes the drug, what they're addicted to. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, did you have there are a lot of, stories in the book that talk about God and relationship with God, and did you have a spiritual upbringing, that somehow in your healing, the church, scripture, Bible, that kind of relationship, helped you? Or did you discover that as something in many stories from people?
Both. I certainly did grow up in a Christian background for sure. I can't say that that necessarily helped with the healing of my own story, although I was certainly in an environment where there's a lot of compassion and, um, yeah, I think that was certainly a helpful part of things for me. Um, but yeah, it was really interesting to see as I interviewed people. Everybody's got a different story, and so is for some people, the God part of things was a big part of their story,
Right.
either as the trauma or as the healing, and it could be both depending on the situation.
Yeah, and it takes, as someone who studies the body and life force energy and, how precious our life force energy is, one of the most precious things we own. So how we use it is is so deeply important. We can use it for healthy results, and it could be used for unhealthy. And then there's that middle ground where, somebody's going to have a second or third drink. They know it's not good for them, but they feel it'll go away. Their body will take care of them. And, a few hours, they'll feel better. But then there are those who struggle with this disease, and survival through pain becomes the way of using their life force energy to the point that for many people they are on the brink of dying and do die.
It's a very high percentage. In fact, I was just reading today that's in death from eating disorders is the second highest mortality rate from any psychiatric illness, only second to opioid addiction. It's pretty terrible.
It's shocking, and I've been invited to go into eating disorder clinics, all young girls, and shocking. I've had people come to my training that are in recovery and still have to monitor how much they do so they don't overdo. So where is that fine line of becoming conscious of protecting your body and working with your body? When does that wake up call come? It's so different for every
It is.
individual,
It
right?
is. Yep.
And but one thing that is not different is the need for listening, for someone to be there, for support, for a safe environment, for a map, tools.
That reminds me that this project has really been out of all the projects I've done, which have been quite a lot, probably the most gratifying to me because some of these people have come back to me over the years and said, Fritz, talking with you and creating that work together was for me the turning point in starting to get healthy. And I
Yeah.
just thought you can't ask for a better compliment than that. That's just amazing. I didn't go into this project to cause that to happen. I just came into it to tell my own story through telling other stories, but to see the way that it's helped both people that participated, but also people who have viewed the work. I hear that a lot too from viewers. Hey, Fritz, I I see this work and I hear my own story or hear my own voice, and I feel like I'm not alone. And that's really powerful to me as well.
Absolutely. With any kind of traumatic experience, when the person traumatized can come to a place of taking the trauma and finding meaning and purpose to then feel valuable. The story is valuable, the truth is valuable, is so very important. So I can see how the opportunity you gave, and I hope you do a second edition. I'd love to see the same people and hear their stories. I think it'd be so
Be
awesome.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Where are they now?
right.
Um, you know, I think everybody has some kind of traumatic experience in life. I don't think anybody gets out without having something that they perceive and say, "This was traumatic to me."
Yes.
And then how do we deal with that so that we don't again internalize it, but we process it, we metabolize it, we express it. A lot of artists do through music or through writing, right? Or through poetry or through painting, right? But the average person, the average youth, how do they process this, on a day-to-day moment, particularly when this is such, um,
Such a
an
distraction all
an
the time.
influence in causing
Yes,
pain, an influence in
exactly.
causing pain and
Yes.
doubt, and I don't fit in, and I'm too fat, or I'm too tall, I'm too whatever it may be. Um, and then watching the withdrawal of a child and not recognizing that's not normal when a child locks themselves in a room, when they don't wanna socialize, when they don't wanna go out. These are all cries, for help. And where do parents go today, for help? We used to go to church, right? A pastor, or to school. Like you said, there was somebody there. Who's there today that's helping the youth?
Teachers and a lot of great counselors out there. I met a lot of them, and yeah, it's hard work that they do, but I think the help is there if people look for it. That's the challenge for somebody with an eating disorder is, it's a secret. It's a big secret that they generally haven't told anybody, either because they want to control or because they're ashamed or whatever. So yeah, taking that first step of being willing to share or be willing to look for help, that's a huge step. But it's I think the first step toward healing. And then once you do start looking for that help, it's out there. You just have to be willing to access it and utilize it. I think Gina tells us in her story. She said her mom took her to a psychologist, and I think they worked together for like a year and a half before she hits this point. And she talks about why she hit this point, right? She came in one day and she said, sat down on the couch, said, "I'm done. I'm ready for help. I don't know what to do." And then her psychologist looked at her and said, "I've been waiting for a year and a half for you to see it."
Yeah.
That was the turning point for her and for so many others to get help, just like me asking for help in the nurse's office in my college.
Well, that's that honesty. That's the our bodies only know truth, and they'll let us know, you're hungry, you need to go to the bathroom, you need to go to sleep, right? We can deny it,
Mhm.
but our body will. And when we come into alignment, I call it, coherence, emotional coherence and synchronicity with our body, then we have a body and life truth, and that creates a resonance that is so necessary for healing. And I love the story that I think it was Gina that tells that how menstruation marked the end of girlhood. Was that Gina? And boy, I tell you, I could relate to that story. I remember when I started to bleed, I went out and sat in the backyard and I looked up at the tree that I'd always climbed fearlessly. And I said to myself, "You can't climb trees anymore." And I remember thinking, "You can't play with the boys anymore." It was the first time I realized I was different. And I remember the depression and the sadness, and, there was no celebration of, "Oh my gosh," that wasn't I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, that was gonna happen. So, the reason I bring this up is if we don't help our youth understand their biology and understand the changes that are going to happen, every time there's a change, it's gonna be traumatic. They're gonna think something is wrong, they're gonna feel lost, and the onset of an eating disorder or cutting or smoking or drinking, anything to mask it, we see it even in adults still today. Masking dealing with the energy of what's going on in their body and life, the anxiety around not being able to control, right? Not being able to control. And, you know, being uncomfortable, there's a little bit of that happens in a body. Yeah, it's uncomfortable, but we're designed to then say, I'm going to make a change so I feel more comfortable because that's what the body will say. Well, what do you need to do? Well, I need to shift my weight, or I need to loosen my belt, or I need to stretch, or I need to get up in the computer or walk around. We're designed to make choices to feel better. But if we're afraid of our body, if we think our body is somehow doing something to us, that relationship that is supposed to be built on trust and sensation, the voice of the body, reading and interpreting body signals. Thanks, body. I'll go do this. All of that is lost. And that child that begins to look outside for answers instead of realizing the answers are in them, the relationship they have with their body, that's something that they're born into and they're gonna die through as well. Um, and have a child that thinks bulimia is cool, I think I'll try it. What's wrong with society? I take that as an offense that, God, I'm just not doing enough. And we did experience that in our home. And, we had a friend that walked into and saw the child and said, "How you doing?" Um, and she answered and said, "I'm doing great." And he turned to her and he said, "Well, then why are you starving yourself?" And his honesty was it was like she heard it. She was
First
seen.
time.
She was
Yeah.
caught. She was caught.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that is such an important piece of calling it out, naming it, and then helping somebody get help.
Yes.
And you mentioned depression and the statistics that over 70% of individuals with anorexia meet the criteria for major depression disorder. And a lot of people during COVID went through deep depression.
Yes.
And I noticed, and I don't know whether it's just me, but I noticed that all of a sudden, more cooking shows started to show up during COVID.
Interesting.
People
Interesting.
turned to food,
Sure.
and I don't know if it has added to any kind of uh, illness, but I looked at it as a red flag. It's like, wow, what is the message in this? And oftentimes the cooking shows, the food is so unhealthy. Um, you also mentioned high achievers. Um, did you find this as kind of a thread that ran through a lot of people, or is it just one of the things that can trigger the eating disorder?
I'd say it's one of the things. One thing I did notice was how it takes a lot of discipline to be to be anorexic, for instance, or to count calories or to calculate things all the time. So I've met people who are like constantly calculating numbers in their head about how much this food is going to cost me in calories and multiply it by this or cut it by this, or people keeping journals and records. So it just takes a ton of mental energy and discipline to do some of the things that people do. So yeah, I think that's certainly a theme. I'm not sure it's the thing that everybody shares in common, but it's certainly one thing I saw here and there, and saw it in myself as well.
I remember, going to, a dinner and, with this family, and one of the women in the family brought out a scale to weigh the food before she ate it in the restaurant, and I'm
Interesting.
looking around the table and I'm thinking to myself, does anybody think that maybe this is a warning sign or a red flag? And everybody's kind of ignoring it with their conversation, and I'm like, "Oh my god," right? Um, Remaining silent. I think what's so great about art and what you've done with your book is, number 1, you didn't remain silent. You took your personal story and used it to help others. And by inviting others in to tell their story, you helped them
Yes.
as
Yeah.
they shared with you. That became the turning point. There's a point in your book you talk about questions, how that questions can become a turning point of healing. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. A couple thoughts there. One is, like I mentioned before, when I would sit down with somebody over coffee and talk with them about their story, I would just ask them questions and listen. This is something that I picked up from a book my grandma gave me as a kid, as a young boy, about like how to have conversations. And it served me well. So I would just ask a question, I'd listen, and then I'd ask another question based on what they shared with me. And that that act of asking a good question and then listening is a way of giving somebody permission to share what's bottled up inside of them. And that kind of permission is both rare and powerful because I think people really want to be heard. They got this thing inside this burning inside of them that hurts. They haven't shared it with somebody else. Probably they haven't been given the opportunity to do so in a safe space, um, in a place where they didn't feel judged. I think they felt safe with me also because I had this a similar background in having had an eating disorder, so that gave us some rapport. But yeah, asking good questions and listening is just such a powerful tool for healing, for building relationship, for building, for overcoming fear. That just I just love seeing how it would draw people out.
How has your relationship with photography changed since writing this book, or has it?
Hmm. The thing that I've continued to do that I still love is I still love using photography and writing to tell other people's stories or to collaborate with people to tell my story and theirs. So, for instance, this past year, I've been collaborating with a woman who struggles with several different chronic illnesses. And she didn't know this when she proposed this project to me. She's a dancer. We'd worked together for a decade, just photographing dance and other things. And one day she approached me and said, Fritz, I have these like 5 things that are pretty serious. What would you think about collaborating on a project that talks about chronic illness? And I said, absolutely yes. And you don't know this about me, but when I was in my 20s, so this is actually right after my eating disorder story. Like literally the next year in college, I got very, very sick with chronic fatigue syndrome.
Ugh,
Possibly related to the eating disorder. I have no idea.
right.
Probably related to some serious car accidents and chiropractic injuries and this and that. Anyway, so I was disabled for all of my 20s, 19 to 31.
Wow.
So she and I have been working on that project. So it's, we're photographing her, but it's also my story I'm telling through those photographs. And then a lot of other projects I've worked on too. Oftentimes they're collaborations or the portraiture, and I'm exploring, other people's experience in life. Oftentimes it's about difficult things. Like I had a kind of a famous series called Astrovelum that's about people with freckles. So the portraits of people with freckles. Uh, People would tell me these stories as we worked together about how they, as a child, they tried to bleach the freckles off with lemon juice. Or
I'm one of those.
you're one of those people.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
am. Just the other
exactly.
day, I'll tell you, I went to the doc I hate it when doctors say, "Oh, well, because you're aging, blah, 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 blah." She looks at my legs and she says, "Oh, and the spots on your legs, because you're aging." I said, "No." I said, "I'm like my mom." I said, "I got freckles all over my
Me
body."
too. Yeah, exactly.
I said, "I've never had clear skin. I don't even know what it looks like." But I remember as a child, how can I get it? How can I create it? I don't want any spots on my skin.
Yep. Yep.
And I
Exactly.
would tell myself, "Well, you're a leopard. This you're
Hmm.
coming back this lifetime as a human, but you were a leopard," to rationalize it.
Right.
Um, that's really, really great. I could relate to it very much. And, I think that the human experience and pain, it's a story of interest to every human being. We see it in theater, we see it in movie scripts, shows written for, Apple TV, the pain, the struggle. And, in many ways, I believe it becomes a way for us to settle that, well, ours is not too bad. Well, mine's not that bad. I think
Yeah.
I'm okay. It's
Yes.
almost like a frame of reference. Whereas I've always hoped that stories of struggle and pain that we read can help us as human beings become more compassionate, more understanding, more loving, more empathetic, and not trigger rage and anger and more violence. I'm hoping that that's where the wave of art can play a key role for this next generation.
Yes.
It's my desire anyway. So
You
anything you
know
can
how
do anything you can do, to help with that, I think would be, fantastic, fantastic, and as I said, I would love to see a second version of this book. Where are they now?
right. Just teaching a workshop last week, and a photography workshop, and one of the quotes I end this workshop with, it's about portraiture. It's a quote by Frederick Buechner, and he talks about it, as artists, um, if we wanna love other people, the first thing we have to do is actually see the other people,
Yeah,
and we have to see them like artists because we take the time to see, to hear, to understand, and listen to them. And that's how we begin to love people, is by actually listening to and seeing them as whole people.
yeah.
I just love that quote. It's so true.
Well, letting them in, and, I don't know if this is true about you, but the photographers that I know are deeply that are what I call really great photographers. They're deeply personal. They love to spend time alone. Um, and that lens, that connective tissue, that interface, that fascia of the lens between themselves and the world outside, it's almost like, a safety net. it becomes a way to control and go in deep and to have a deeply intimate connection.
Yeah.
And yet there's a sense of safety because it's behind the camera. Would you say that's true?
I'd say it's true for me to an extent. Yeah, I love photography or I love being an artist because it gives me a reason or excuse to get to know people deeply and to tell these deep stories. And I love that kind of connection with other people. I think shallow connections with people is boring. That's just my personality. So, but I am an introvert, right? So yeah, I can spend all day alone, no problem. But I love people at the same time. So there's that little bit of a conundrum. So for me as an artist, for me to get together with somebody else and talk about whether in this project or anything else I do, talk about what you're struggling with or what real life is like for you, and then create something beautiful out of it. That's just heavenly for me. And I think that's really redemptive too. That's the thing about art that I love so much is that we can take something like you were just referring to. You take something that we struggle with, something painful in life, and if we can create something beautiful out of it, whether it's a poem or a song or a photograph or painting or play, whatever, that's just so redemptive. It makes that pain kind of worthwhile. Or for some people, they take that struggle and it becomes a career path for them to become a counselor, whatever, a nurse. That's a way for them to give back based on their pain. I just think that's really lovely and redemptive and beautiful.
Absolutely. Is there a little invisible, silent trauma seed that you've been holding on to that you say, I know at some point I will tell this story and do another book about this, inviting people to tell their story?
A personal trauma seed, you mean something from my own experience?
Yeah, maybe.
Sometimes it's more just like curiosity too. Like I'm curious to know about what it's like to have been this person who deals with this kind of thing. So yeah, I think the chronic illness project I'm working on right now is what you're describing. Like that was a big deal for me at 19 to get laid out and be in bed for 19 hours a day for a decade. That was serious. And I had to drop out of school, right? All those things I talked about earlier that I loved so much, right? I had to drop out of school and lost so many of my friendships and my, whatever for a decade to lose all those things was deeply traumatic. So to find a way now to talk about it 30 years later is really powerful.
Did you get any, what I would say, effective medical support?
Eventually, it took a long time because people couldn't figure out what was happening. Eventually, some friends took me to their chiropractor that they liked, and this guy took X-rays, and this is probably 5, 6 years in, and he just showed me. Yeah, I mean, I could see it on the piece of film on the screen there, all the ways my back was just a complete mess. And he said, "Yeah, your nerves are pinched, your blood flow shut down to your organs are slowing down." So yeah, I had to go 3 days a week to the chiropractor for years. And so a friend would drive me in. I'd see the chiropractor. I'd go home and I'd be kind of worn out for 2 days. And the
Yeah.
third day, somebody else would pick me up and take me to the chiropractor again. So that and naturopathic stuff super helpful. And that's after, of course, I'd exhausted every
Yeah.
normal medical path for 5 years before I hit that point too.
Well,
So yeah, long slow
thank
process.
goodness. Thank goodness, I went that route myself and, was seeing chiropractor, 5 days a week for about 2 months, and then decreased it because there was a time I have a reverse curve in my neck, so I couldn't look up, and they said, "Oh, you'll never be able to." I get massage work every single week to keep my spine mobile, and boy, I can tell you, I so relate when my any part of my spine is out, the level of of fatigue from a lack of flow of life force is unbelievable, and, I'm gonna end with how sensitive we are, how precious we are, how tender we are, and how most of us have some kind of skeleton in the closet. And it's worth opening the door. It's worth digging around and seeing, would it be of value to find somebody to talk to, somebody to listen, to help you on your healing journey? And here's what I have to say: small things can be big, small things can make a huge difference. So if you found yourself saying, well, you know, the trauma, it wasn't that bad. It's bad. The moment you say it wasn't that bad, it means you're tolerating, you're putting up with something that's itching, it's underneath the skin, it's wanting attention. Energy follows attention. Our job is to work with our body, to collaborate, to communicate, to be in relationship with our body so that we can live a healthy, meaningful, productive, fulfilling, personal, joyful life in our body at every stage of our life. Fritz, I want to thank you so much for this conversation, unpacking such a complex topic in such a beautiful way. And if people want to get your book or find out more about you, where can they go?
Yeah, the book you can pick up on Amazon. You could just type in "skeleton in the closet" and Fritz, and it would come up for you. And then I'm online as well, and I'm sure I'll be linked in your show notes here so they can find me online. My personal fine art website is just fritzliedtke.com, but it's hard to spell. So get the link from the show notes here, and you can take a look at some of my work there.
Yay, beautiful. And, as I said, it's beautiful. It's got images, photographs, stories. You're going to love it. I want to thank everybody for listening today. And remember, this is our time to get in. It's one of the most important times to listen, to see, and to get into a conversation. I'm deeply grateful, Fritz, for this opportunity to hear about you and your work and to, in many ways, make visible something that, well, it's real and it's been happening for a long time. People hurting, and we need to help each other, whether it's through writing or art. Listen and connect. If you want to find out more about me, you can go to debbierosas.com. If you'd like to experience a beautiful in-body movement art experience, 2 weeks free, you can sign up on Nia On Demand. You can also type in nianow.com and Nia Technique. And I am grateful for this opportunity to get into meaningful and important conversations with you. And I'll see you next time.